Global stability has been challenged by conflicts and political deadlocks in vital zones, such as Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Furthermore, beyond these areas, there is speculation about a potential new war in the Far East Pacific. The Pacific is becoming a theater that Russia and China are trying to construct against the United States and the West. The Pacific nations in this region are, of course, very apprehensive about the current circumstances. First Taiwan, then the Philippines, then South Korea and Japan, the country where North Korea recently launched a missile, are on heightened alert for prospective hazardous intentions by Russia and China. These countries possess a strong military and political alliance with the US against Russia and China. However, Pacific nations perceive this alliance as insufficient. Therefore, these Pacific countries are planning to establish their own military defensive grounds against the series of dangers presented by Russia and China. One such country is, without doubt, Japan. The Kuril Islands dispute, arising from Russia's desire for a deterrent naval presence in the Sea of Japan following its blockade of Taiwan, and most recently, North Korea's missile tests in the Sea of Japan, have pushed the Tokyo government to a crucial point. Japan's defense sources believe that the actual problem will begin after any possible Russian action on the Kuril Islands. The Kuril Islands matter, also known as the Northern Territories dispute, is a disagreement between Japan and Russia over the ownership of the 4 southern Kuril Islands. Tokyo therefore intends to prevent Moscow from pressuring it in the Pacific over the Kuril Islands. If Japan fails to respond adequately to Russia regarding the Kuril Islands, the Chinese and North Korean side will likely perceive it as an opportunity. In particular, a true alliance between Russia and China against Japan could plunge the Tokyo government into a predicament from which it would be unable to escape. Thus, considering all these risks, Tokyo is preparing for a war against Russia, primarily, but also against China, one of the key actors in the Eastern Bloc. Now we will examine in much greater detail how Japan is attempting to block Russia and China on the Pacific coast. But first, please remember to subscribe to our channel, activate notifications, and like the video to stay informed about our content. Let's get started. First, let's examine what sort of military power Japan currently possesses. Despite its innocuous name, the Japan Self-Defense Forces is one of the most potent militaries in the world, with the 8th largest budget, a navy larger than France and the United Kingdom combined, more than 1,600 aircraft and 4 flat-topped carriers. In addition, Japan possesses what is considered a complex system to protect against incoming missiles in the event of a war with North Korea. However, all this is considered inadequate within the country. Japan's defense ministry is seeking the acquisition of interceptor military capabilities, such as cruise missiles capable of destroying enemy missiles before they are launched. This is seen as a plan to deter potential Russian missile strikes in the direction of the Kuril Islands. To this end, Japan has, in fact, taken the initial step, confirming its plan to procure 78 Tomahawk missiles from the United States. These missiles reinforce Japan's growing role in its defense strategy in the Indo-Pacific region, confronting possible threats from Russia and China. Deliveries of the missiles will be complete by March 2028, at which point Japan will likely secure its Pacific coast, to a great extent, against Russian and Chinese dangers. The Tomahawk is a long-range, precision weapon used by surface ships and submarines of the US military. Ranges vary slightly between versions of the missile, but it can reach targets up to a distance of approximately 1,500 miles, or 2,500 kilometers. This range far surpasses the 300-mile range provided by the U.S. Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS ballistic missiles. These missiles can render Russian assets and military infrastructure vulnerable at long distances. In other words, Japan could intimidate Putin with its stockpile of Tomahawks over the Kuril Islands, where it has a deep crisis with Russia. According to RAN, the defense giant that manufactures the missiles, the US and its allies have used the munition more than 2,300 times in combat. There are numerous variations of the Tomahawk, including the new and modernized Block 5 series, which the US has spent the last few years developing for a potential Chinese crisis. It is crucial that Japan and Australia possess Tomahawk missiles. In addition to these missiles, Japan is also taking significant steps to safeguard its airspace from Russian and Chinese aircraft. Stronger surveillance and response capabilities, including advanced radar and aircraft, as well as Japan's long-standing alliance with the United States, are thought to deter the People's Republic of China and Russia. Recent instances demonstrate the necessity for Japan to possess an air defense deterrent. In September 2024, a Russian military surveillance plane entered Japanese airspace 3 times near Japan's northernmost prefecture of Hokkaido, prompting Tokyo to scramble F-15 and F-35 fighter jets. According to the Japanese Defense Ministry, this violation follows an incident a month ago when a PRC surveillance plane violated Japanese airspace near the southwestern prefecture of Nagasaki. Beijing claimed that the incident was purely accidental. According to Japan's local news agency, after Russia's incursions, Japan's defense minister, Minoru Kihara, stated that Japan remains vigilant against such actions by the PRC and Russia, including entering the country's maritime borders. Minoru Kihara also pledged that Japan will take all possible measures to detect and counter such violations. The government considers the defense of Hokkaido to be a priority for Tokyo, given the island's proximity to North Korea and Russia, and the importance of the sea area around it for shipping. We see widespread investment by Japan in the region in terms of space, air, and maritime surveillance technology, and this is important to build a robust and thorough domain awareness to best respond to Russia. According to Japan's 2024 Defense White Paper, Russia is expanding its military presence in the Kuril Islands near Hokkaido, an archipelago controlled by Russia but claimed by Japan. This includes upgraded facilities for its ground forces, deploying new fighter jets, coastal anti-ship missile systems, and other weapons, and conducting large-scale military exercises. In response to Russia's buildup, Japan has reinforced its air and sea defenses with constant surveillance. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force operates 28 radar sites and early warning aircraft to monitor the country's airspace. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force is conducting surveillance with P-3C aircraft, escort vessels, and other assets, and key territorial waters are protected by JMSDF and Japan Ground Self-Defense Force observation posts. On the other hand, the Tokyo government is also increasing its military expenditure in response to Vladimir Putin's pressure policy. With this policy, Japan is accelerating its defense expenditure at an incredible rate and accumulating the military stockpiles required for modern wars. For decades, Japan's defense expenditure has remained at or below 1% of its gross domestic product. Now, the Tokyo government, under Kishida, aims to nearly double defense spending to 2% in 5 years. This will be the first time this plan has been implemented since World War II. The new year has also begun with indications of increased military expenditure for Tokyo. Japan's cabinet approved a record $55 billion defense budget for 2025, as Japan increases its ability to counterattack with long-range cruise missiles and begins deploying Tomahawk missiles to counter growing threats from North Korea, the People's Republic of China, and Russia. The budget marks the 3rd year of Japan's 5-year defense investment under its national security strategy, adopted in 2022. The allocation is seen as part of a proposed national budget of more than $730 billion that requires parliamentary approval. The budget allocates $6 billion for a remote defense system, including long-range missiles, satellite constellations, and other arsenals. The purchase and addition of Tomahawk launch equipment from Aegis-class destroyers cost a total of $11.4 million. Japan plans to spend an additional $3.37 billion to strengthen its missile defense system. This will include the acquisition of interceptors and mobile reconnaissance radar for Okinawa, where more than half of the approximately 50,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan are based. As part of its national security strategy, Japan will increase its annual defense spending to approximately $63 billion, making it the 3rd largest defense spender in the world after the U.S. and the PRC. Japan is also trying to strengthen its domestic defense industry through joint development projects and overseas sales. Japan plans to spend $2 billion to build 3 multi-purpose compact destroyers in 2025 that will require 90 crew members, less than half the crew size currently needed, thanks to automation and labor-saving design. Officials say the upgraded Mogami-class destroyers are equipped with long-range missiles, enhanced anti-submarine equipment, and high-stealth performance. The destroyers built by Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries are also competing for Australia's C-3000 frigate project. Japan's defense minister, General Nakatani, said in November 2024 that the project would deepen cooperation between Australia and Japan and increase Japan's warship capabilities. So both countries have developed close ties as they face growing dangers from the PRC. Japan, along with Italy and the United Kingdom, is also developing a next-generation fighter jet for deployment in 2035 and has allocated $690 million from the 2025 budget for the project. The United Kingdom is taking further steps to ensure Japan's security in the Pacific. To this end, the UK and Japan will hold regular military exercises in the Indo-Pacific from 2025 to enhance security and further develop the ability of each country's armed forces to act together. These exercises will also involve the United States. The aim is to make Russia's Far Eastern maritime areas more secure. The exercises are therefore expected to extend to the North Pacific Ocean. For the UK and Japan, military exercises in this region are of great importance. The UK is already conducting several exercises in the region where HMS Spey and HMS Tamar are permanently deployed. Next year, the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales will deploy to the region at the head of an aircraft carrier strike group that will conduct a series of operations and exercises with partners and allies, including a port visit in Japan. With such operations, HMS Prince of Wales follows the successful deployment of its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, to the region in 2021. This support from the United Kingdom will strengthen Japan's position against Russia. The fact that Japan is Russia's neighbor is often overlooked, especially in the West. The UK has taken this into account in its strategy. Japan has not had a land border with Russia for 79 years. However, Japan has always confronted Russia along the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk, and was at the forefront of the Cold War in Asia until 35 years ago. Now, as the geopolitical conflict between Russia and the West re-emerges, Japan is once again on the front lines. So for Tokyo, the Pacific is indeed one of the areas to pay attention to. The submarine power of the Russian Pacific Fleet is being steadily built up, with particular emphasis on the modernization of nuclear ballistic missile submarines. The Japanese wing has therefore decided to conduct joint military exercises with the United Kingdom in the Pacific in 2025. Oh, but the problem for Japan was not only Russia's increasing number of submarines. Satellite imagery showed that Russia's nuclear ballistic missile submarine fleet had become significantly more active in recent years. The risk was seen as that increased Russian submarine activity north of Japan could strain the deterrent resources of the US-Japanese alliance in the face of the Chinese threat. The US and Japan, together with their Indo-Pacific partners, have sought to balance Chinese military power. Now, with Russia's renewed activity, this strategy is expanding northwards. The US side is also aware of the growing Russian threats. Washington also knows that Beijing supports Moscow in the Pacific. For this reason, the US and Japan are pursuing a more deterrent strategy in terms of military bases. Most recently on this issue, Tokyo announced that it would establish a permanent joint headquarters in Japan to command the Japanese self-defense forces during a crisis. If fully implemented, this would give Japan its own version of combatant command and simplify its coordination with US forces in the event of a major emergency. So, a US Marine Corps coastal regiment is planned to be established in Okinawa, which will be operational by 2025. This unit would be capable of conducting maritime interdiction operations, as it would include both an infantry battalion and a battery of anti-ship missiles equipped with the Marine Corps medium-range NMESIS launcher. Such a unit would probably operate from Okinawa, but would also be based around Ishigaki, Yonaguni, and Makako, providing new capabilities close to the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, the US Congress wants to establish a new joint force headquarters in the Indo-Pacific to do the same for American military forces. These changes will, of course, take time. Once in place, however, they will provide the US-Japan alliance with the beginnings of an architecture for wartime command and control. In fact, unlike NATO or the US-South Korea military alliance, Washington and Tokyo have never had a truly unified command structure. This was evident during Operation Tomodachi in 2011, when the Allies initially struggled to respond to the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. But things are changing today. Establishing joint headquarters is the first step towards a joint and unified command that can provide allied wartime command and control, even in the most stressful scenarios. Japan and the United States are also acting in this manner. The main purpose of the alliance is to remind Russia of ancient history. Nearly a century ago, one of the greatest naval battles in history took place in the Tsushima Strait, where the Japanese Navy defeated the Russian Baltic Fleet. However, the role of the Tsushima Strait during the Cold War is not well known. Tsushima was the strait of the Soviet fleet sailing from Vladivostok to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Just as Russian Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky had to pass through Tsushima during the Russo-Japanese War, Soviet submarine captains had to do the same. Nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines were no exception. Submarines from the Soviet Northern Fleet made various efforts to avoid underwater hydrophone systems, as witnessed by American and Soviet submariners. The same happened in the waters around Japan. Soviet submarines usually cut their engines very close to the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force observation posts in the Tsushima Strait, and then sailed quietly into the East China Sea on the currents. Soviet corvettes were always anchored in the strait, and when nuclear submarines passed by, they would start their engines to intercept Japan's underwater hydrophones. On the other hand, it was possible to reach the Pacific Ocean from Kamchatka unhindered by narrow passages. Thus, the Pacific Fleet submarine units gradually made this peninsula their home base, and almost every month, a Yankee-class submarine would move from here to the patrol area known as the Yankee Box, 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers from the west coast of the United States. In the mid-1970s, Delta I, Delta II, and Delta III class submarines appeared in the Pacific Fleet, equipped with long-range R-29 and R-29R ballistic missiles. The Delta ones no longer needed to sneak across the Pacific to waters off the U.S. mainland. Instead, the strategy was to retreat to waters near the Soviet Union, where it would be easier to get support from friendly forces. The Delta ones also had another advantage. While they had to travel as high as 15 knots when heading towards the coast, the Delta ones could travel at a lower speed of 4 to 8 knots. This contributed to greatly increasing their probability of survival. Shortly after the first Delta I was deployed in 1974, the Soviet Union began to fortify the area around the Sea of Okhotsk. The first step was the deployment of ground forces. The 18th Machine Gun Artillery Division was created and sent to the southern Kuril Islands for the first time in 20 years. These islands and Sakhalin Island were equipped with surface-to-ship missiles and air defense systems. In addition to these developments, a huge caldera on Simushir Island was converted into a submarine base. Today, Russia dreams of re-establishing a military autocracy in the Pacific, but Japan stands firmly in the way of Russia's Pacific dreams, not only with its own national military activities, but also with regional actors, especially the United States and Western Alliance forces. All this collective power puts a deep barrier between Russia and China, which wants to support an autocratic order in the Pacific. In short, with all these steps we have described so far, Japan cares too much about the Pacific to leave it in the hands of Russia and China. Thank you for choosing our channel. A lot of significant global occurrences have unfolded lately. Let's delve into these events and take a closer look at them. Please, if you value the information provided in this video, consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and turning on notifications, as it really is important for our channel's growth. Also, I would love to know where you're watching from. Please write it in the comments below. Please stay with us until the end of this video, because the conclusions will be delivered at the very end. The global arena faces a re-emergence of intricate geopolitical tensions, driven by conflicts in pivotal regions like Eastern Europe and the Middle East. This instability is further intensified by the looming prospect of a new conflict brewing in the Far East Pacific. This area, which was once considered a region of tranquility, is increasingly transforming into a stage for power plays between Russia and China, and their opposition to the United States and the Western powers. Pacific countries, deeply intertwined within this dynamic, are understandably feeling a heightened sense of unease. The countries of Taiwan, Philippines, South Korea, and particularly Japan, which recently had a missile launch by North Korea, are on an advanced alert status, considering the very real prospect of hostile activities initiated by the alliance of Russia and China. These nations maintain strong political and military ties with the United States in a united front against Russian and Chinese influence. However, there is a prevailing sense within the Pacific countries that their current ties with the USA are inadequate for the threats they face. As a consequence, these nations are actively working towards developing their own independent military defenses, aiming to create a robust shield against the evolving hazards presented by Russia and China. A prime example of this is Japan, whose geopolitical significance has intensified with the rise of the Kuril Islands dispute. The disagreement stems from Moscow's desire for a potent naval presence in the Sea of Japan after its blockade of Taiwan and a series of missile tests from North Korea in the same waters. The Tokyo government has reached a decisive point, and defense analysts suggest any attempt by Russia on the Kuril Islands could ignite more serious escalations. The Kuril Islands issue, also termed as the Northern Territories conflict, is a source of dispute over the ownership of 4 Kuril Islands located south. Tokyo is working to stop Russia from asserting control in the Pacific region, and any inadequate reaction on the Kuril Islands might signal an opportune moment for China and North Korea. Especially, a formidable alliance between Russia and China against Japan could have an irreversible negative impact on the Tokyo government. Considering these serious hazards, Japan is preparing for a potential war with Russia as a primary adversary, as well as with China. This preparation will be the main topic of discussion as we move further. But now, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, activate the notifications, and make sure to like this video so that you can stay up to date with our content. So, with that being said, let's move on to the next chapter. The military might of Japan is often underestimated. This will now be our point of focus. Despite having the innocuous name of the Japan Self-Defense Forces, it is one of the most well-funded and well-equipped militaries in the world. With the 8th highest military budget globally, a navy that is larger than France and United Kingdoms combined, and a fleet exceeding 1,600 aircraft and 4 flat-topped aircraft carriers, Japan is not a force to be taken lightly. Add to that the sophistication of its missile defense systems, it is quite clear Japan is well equipped to repel an attack by North Korea. However, Japan does not see this as sufficient. They are actively looking for acquisitions to increase their defensive capabilities. This has resulted in the Ministry of Defense of Japan seeking to acquire interceptor military capabilities, like cruise missiles, that can take out an enemy's missiles before they can launch. This is seen as a preventative step, aimed at curbing any potential Russian missile attacks targeting the Kuril Islands. To this end, the government has taken the initial step of confirming a purchase order of 78 Tomahawk missiles from the United States. This acquisition significantly enhances Japan's role in the security architecture of the Indo-Pacific region, aimed to counter any potential threat from Russia and China. The plan is for the delivery of these weapons to be completed by March of 2028. Once these missiles have been delivered, Japan will likely have a strong line of defense for its Pacific coast from the growing threats posed by Russia and China. The Tomahawk missile, a long-range high-precision weapon, is a key component of the surface and subsurface fleet of the U.S. military. Different models of the missile have slightly different ranges, but at the end of the day, it can target any objective at a distance of 1,500 miles, or 2,500 kilometers. These distances are substantially longer than the 300-mile range provided by the U.S. Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS ballistic missiles. This difference gives Japan an advantage. These missiles can strike deep into Russian assets and military infrastructures. Japan can therefore use their stockpile of Tomahawk missiles to put pressure on Putin, given the crisis surrounding the Kuril Islands. According to Raytheon, the giant in defense manufacturing, these missiles have been deployed by the U.S. and its allies in more than 2,300 combat scenarios. Numerous variants of the missile exist, and the new modernized Block 5 series are particularly noteworthy. The U.S. has poured a considerable amount of time and resources into developing these for a possible crisis with China. Therefore, possessing Tomahawk missiles is crucial for Japan and Australia. Aside from missiles, Japan is also focusing on enhancing its airspace protection against the planes of China and Russia. To this end, Japan is investing in stronger surveillance and response capabilities, including enhanced radar and more advanced aircraft. This, along with Japan's strong ties with the United States, is intended to put off the People's Republic of China and Russia. These defensive capabilities have proven their necessity with multiple recent incidents. This will be our topic of discussion. In September of 2024, a Russian military surveillance plane made a 3-time entry into Japanese airspace near Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost prefecture. This forced Tokyo to scramble F-15 and F-35 fighter jets to intercept the intruder. According to the Japanese Defense Ministry, this violation came a month after a similar violation by a PRC surveillance aircraft in Japanese airspace near Nagasaki, a prefecture in the southwestern area. The incident was claimed by Beijing to be a mistake, a pure accident. However, Japan's local news agency reported that Japan's Minister of Defense, Minoru Kihara, stated that Japan is on alert for these kinds of actions by Russia and China. This includes any violation of maritime borders as well. The minister has committed to taking every possible measure to detect and fight these violations. Tokyo considers the defense of Hokkaido a priority because of the region's close proximity to Russia and North Korea, and because it is also a vital sea route for shipping. The Japanese government is making major investments into the region with a specific focus on technology for space, air, and maritime surveillance. This should lead to an overall robust awareness system that is needed for a swift response to Russia's actions. According to Japan's 2024 Defense White Paper, Russia is increasingly making its presence known in the Kuril Islands, which are near Hokkaido and under Russian control, but which are still claimed by Japan. Russia's presence includes upgraded infrastructure for its ground troops, the deployment of new fighters, coastal anti-ship missile systems, weapons, and large-scale military drills. Japan has responded to this buildup with constant air and sea surveillance. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force utilizes 28 radar sites and early warning aircraft for monitoring the national airspace. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force is monitoring key territorial waters using P-3C aircraft, escort vessels, and other surveillance assets. In a response to the pressure put forth by Vladimir Putin, the Tokyo government is also increasing its military spending. This means that Japan is boosting its military budget and creating stockpiles for modern wars at an astonishing pace. For the last few decades, Japan's defense budget has remained at or below 1% of its gross domestic product, or GDP. But with the current government of Kishida, Japan is looking to double its defense spending to 2% in a 5-year period. This would be the first implementation of this plan since the end of World War II. The start of the new year has also been marked by an increase in military spending. The Japanese cabinet has already approved a record budget of $55 billion for 2025. This is a big step in Japan's quest to increase its capabilities by acquiring long-range cruise missiles and deploying Tomahawk missiles, aimed to fight the increasing threat that is coming from Russia, China, and North Korea. This budget also marks the 3rd year of the 5-year investment plan, which is a part of the national security strategy that was adopted in 2022. This allocation is a part of the proposed national budget of more than $730 billion and requires parliamentary approval. An allocation of $6 billion has been earmarked for a remote defense system, including long-range missiles, satellite constellations, and other important defensive tools. The purchase and implementation of the Tomahawk launch equipment on the Aegis-class destroyers will cost a total of $11.4 million. Additionally, another $3.37 billion are to be spent in strengthening missile defense systems. This will also include the purchase of mobile reconnaissance radar and interceptors for Okinawa, where more than half of the 50,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan are based. As a part of its national security strategy, Japan will increase its annual defense budget to approximately $63 billion. This will make Japan the 3rd largest defense spender in the world, following the US and China. In addition, the country is also working to bolster its domestic defense industry by means of joint development projects and through sales to other countries. Japan has also made plans to allocate $2 billion for the construction of 3 multi-purpose compact destroyers in 2025. These destroyers will have a crew of only 90 individuals. By making use of automation and by using a labor-saving design, this will reduce the crew size by half. According to officials, the upgraded Mogami-class destroyers are equipped with the latest weaponry, including long-range missiles, enhanced anti-submarine equipment, and stealth performance. The destroyers, manufactured by Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, are also competing to secure Australia's C-3000 frigate project. General Nakatani, the defense minister of Japan, stated in November of 2024 that the project would strengthen the ties between Australia and Japan and would increase warship capabilities as both nations face increasing dangers from the PRC. Another major project involves Japan, Italy, and the United Kingdom. They are collaboratively developing the next-generation fighter jet, which is expected to be deployed in 2035. Japan has allocated $690 million for this project in the 2025 budget. The United Kingdom is also taking additional steps to ensure the safety of Japan in the Pacific. Therefore, Japan and the UK have committed to holding regular military exercises in the Indo-Pacific region from 2025, with the intention to enhance security and to promote the cooperation of armed forces of both countries. These drills will also involve the United States and are aimed at making Russia's Far Eastern maritime territories more secure. The exercises are also set to expand to the North Pacific Ocean. These drills are of utmost importance for the UK and Japan. The UK already conducts drills in the area where HMS Spey and HMS Tamar are permanently stationed. In the coming year, the Royal Navy's aircraft carrier, HMS Prince of Wales, will also be joining this region. The Prince of Wales will lead the aircraft carrier strike group in a number of operations and exercises with allies, and will also make a port visit to Japan. This deployment follows the successful deployment of its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, in the area in 2021. The support from the UK will significantly bolster Japan's position against Russia. The fact that Japan is Russia's immediate neighbor is often overlooked, specifically in the West. This fact has been taken into account in the strategic planning of the United Kingdom. For the last 79 years, Japan has not shared a land border with Russia. However, Japan has always been in direct confrontation with Russia across the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk. It was on the front lines of the Cold War in Asia until 35 years ago. And now, as geopolitical conflict has resurfaced between the West and Russia, Japan has once again been placed at the very front of the line. Therefore, for Tokyo, the Pacific region is indeed an area that requires their full attention. The submarine power of the Russian Pacific Fleet is steadily growing, with a specific focus on modernizing nuclear ballistic missile submarines. As a response, the Japanese wing has decided to conduct joint military exercises with the United Kingdom in the Pacific in 2025. The problem for Japan was not just the rising number of submarines of Russia. Satellite imagery has also revealed an increased activity of the Russian nuclear ballistic missile submarine fleet. The risk here is that this increased submarine activity to the north of Japan could negatively impact the deterrent resources of the US-Japanese alliance, especially when considering the threat of China. The US and Japan, together with their Indo-Pacific partners, have been attempting to balance the military power of China, and with this renewed activity of Russia, the strategy is expanding northwards. The US is also well aware of the growing dangers that are stemming from Russia, and Washington knows that Beijing provides support to Moscow in the Pacific. Because of this, the US and Japan are opting for a more deterrent approach, with a specific focus on military bases. To this end, Tokyo recently made the announcement of plans to establish a permanent joint headquarters in Japan to command the Japanese self-defense forces in a time of crisis. This would provide Japan with its own version of the combatant command, and it would also simplify its coordination with US forces in a major emergency. The US Marine Corps Coastal Regiment is also set to be established in Okinawa by 2025. This unit would be capable of carrying out maritime interdiction operations, since it includes both an infantry battalion and a battery of anti-ship missiles, all equipped with the Marine Corps medium-range NMESIS launcher. It is likely that this unit will operate from Okinawa, but it may also be based around Ishigaki, Yonaguni, and Makako to provide new capabilities near the Taiwan Strait. Concurrently, the US Congress has proposed establishing a new joint force headquarters in the Indo-Pacific region that would fulfill the same function for the US military. These changes will inevitably take some time to implement. However, once these new establishments are in place, the US-Japan alliance will have the beginnings of an architecture for the control and command during wartime. In contrast to the military alliance of NATO and the US with South Korea, Washington and Tokyo have never had a unified command structure. This was clearly visible during Operation Tomodachi in 2011, when the Allies struggled to respond to the Tohoku earthquake and the tsunami. But now, things are changing. The establishment of joint headquarters is the first step toward a unified command that is capable of providing Allied command in the face of even the most stressful situations. The main intention of the current alliance is to remind Russia of a historical conflict. Nearly a century ago, one of the biggest naval battles of all time took place in the Tsushima Strait, where the Japanese Navy defeated the Russian Baltic Fleet. But the role of the Tsushima Strait during the Cold War is a lesser-known fact. Tsushima was the route used by the Soviet fleet to sail from Vladivostok to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Just like Russian Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky had to go through the strait during the Russo-Japanese War, the same task fell onto the Soviet submarine captains. Nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines were not an exception. The submarines of the Soviet Northern Fleet made numerous attempts to evade underwater hydrophone systems, as testified by both Soviet and American submariners. The same was true in the waters surrounding Japan. Soviet submarines usually shut down their engines near the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force observation posts in the Tsushima Strait, and then would proceed into the East China Sea using the currents. Soviet corvettes were usually anchored in the strait, and whenever a nuclear submarine passed by, they would activate their engines to disrupt the underwater hydrophones of Japan. However, it was also possible to reach the Pacific Ocean from Kamchatka without going through any narrow passages. The submarine units of the Pacific Fleet began using this peninsula as their home base, and on a monthly basis, a Yankee-class submarine would travel from here to its patrol area near the west coast of the U.S. In the mid-1970s, Delta I, Delta II, and Delta III class submarines were added to the Pacific Fleet. These were equipped with long-range R-29 and R-29R ballistic missiles. The Delta I's no longer needed to go across the Pacific to the waters off of the coast of the U.S. The strategy became to retreat to the waters near the Soviet Union. This allowed them to easily get support from friendly forces. The Delta I's also had another advantage. Whereas the older models would travel at speeds up to 15 knots on their way to the coast, the Delta I's could travel at speeds between 4 and 8 knots. This significantly increased their probability of survival. The Soviet Union began to fortify the area surrounding the Sea of Okhotsk soon after the deployment of the Delta I in 1974. The first step included deploying ground forces. The 18th Machine Gun Artillery Division was created and deployed to the southern Kuril Islands for the first time in the past 20 years. These islands, along with Sakhalin Island, were equipped with surface-to-ship missiles and with air defense systems. Adding to these developments, a large caldera on Simushir Island was converted into a submarine base. Modern-day Russia has the dream of re-establishing a military autocracy in the Pacific. However, Japan stands directly in the path of their dream, not only with their military activities, but also with the support of the United States and its allies. This collective force creates a substantial barrier between Russia and China, as both countries would like to assert an autocratic order in the Pacific region. To sum it all up, Japan cares too much about the Pacific and has no intention of letting the region fall into the hands of Russia and China. And with that, we thank you for being with our channel. Important note, the following sections are separated for clarity, but would be combined into a single response.